What's up, Red Wings fans? Welcome to a special edition of The Word on Woodward, presented by Pointsbet, an official gaming partner of the Red Wings, Tigers, and Little Caesars Arena. Steve Yzerman press conference coming at you in just a couple of minutes. He's expected to go live at about 4 o'clock. So before that, I'm going to bring in Art Regner and Carly Johnston. And you guys, just when we thought the day wasn't going to get any crazier, it got even crazier 2 minutes before we're talking right now. So the Red Wings recently signed Luke Witkowski, who we're really excited to have back in the organization, and Dan Renouf, both to two-way deals. Renouf for 1 year, Luke Witkowski for 2 years. Carly, I know you were a big Luke fan, and he's probably really excited to come back. Even if this is a depth move, he's a great guy to have in your organization.
Well, for sure. And just with the recent news that we no longer have Joe Hicketts, and Dylan McElrath, the Grand Rapids Griffins, if he is over in Grand Rapids, they need a rough and tumble player, and that's Luke Witkowski. So he's definitely going to fill the void of having, I feel like an enforcer is somewhat of an older term in the NHL, but, Luke Witkowski was that guy for the Detroit Red Wings just a couple of years ago. So I know he's coming from the Syracuse Crunch. And then, like you said, a two-way deal for 2 years. So hopefully we'll see him down in Detroit, I should say. But, the Grand Rapids Griffins will be so lucky to have him. And so would we with the Red Wings.
Yeah, local product of Holland, Michigan. So I'm sure he's really excited to come back. And like you said, Syracuse Crunch, which is Tampa Bay's AHL team. So definitely some ties to Steve Yzerman there too. Really looking forward to that. Art, let's move right into some of the other news that we got over the last 24 hours here. Sam Gagner will be returning as a Red Wing, and he's going to play a really important role on this team. He's a veteran guy, definitely has the leadership. And in his press conference, he was talking about how he was able to play in different situations, and he felt like that really helped his game, and that he still has a lot more game left in him. Art, are you looking forward to seeing him back in a Red Wings uniform?
Yeah, certainly I am. I mean, you need some calming influences, and this is going to be, it really is shaping up that. And I got this feeling hearing Steve talk the last couple of times he says Zooms that I think he's ready to see what they have in some of their young players. And if you're going to do that, which I agree with, by the way, then you're going to need a veteran presence. I mean, Sam Gagner, first-round draft pick by the Edmonton Oilers, 6th overall. It was interesting. I asked him yesterday who mentored him. He said Sean Horkoff, who happens to be, the director of player development for the Red Wings. So I think it's a good move. He's a very calm player. He had a really good year for the Red Wings last year, 15.7 goals. He was only a -4, averaging almost 15 and a half minutes. I like it. Calming influence, that's what the Red Wings need. And very importantly, he's a right-handed shot. And don't forget Witter, too. Witkowski's also a right-handed shot, and he played a little forward when he was up with the Red Wings. So he can go up and down. He can play the front end or the back end, as they say. And so I'm sure he's happy. I think the happiest guy has to be Danny DeKeyser, right? You've got Witkowski's back, his line mate at Western, and then Jordan Osterley, who also played at Western with Danny DeKeyser. So, looks like Steve, I know he wears that Michigan Red Wing cap a lot, but he's probably got one of those Western ones too, because he likes his Broncos as well.
If he doesn't have one yet, he better get one. As you mentioned, our Jordan Osterley was signed to a deal with the Red Wings as well. And Pius Suter, who was probably the biggest news of Red Wings free agency thus far. So he really made a splash his rookie season in Chicago. He had 27 points in 55 games. A lot of people were really surprised, including myself, that Chicago didn't qualify him. But I love the move to sign him here in Detroit. Carly, what do you think he's going to bring to this Red Wings team?
I think when we talked to him yesterday, that was this morning. Hello. When we talked to him this morning, it was fun to hear him talk about playing against the Red Wings. And he said he always unfortunately, he played a little too well against the Red Wings, if you know what I mean. But he said it was always fun to play against the Red Wings. They're a quick team. They're a younger team. So I think he'll fit right in with this team. And I think he can bring some offensive scoring chances. But I also think he could bring goals, not just the shots on that, but the goals. So hopefully he can fit in well, like I said, with the team and bring a little bit more of a spark, and not just a spark, and inside the organization, bring some competition for the forwards there.
And Steve Yzerman should be coming up any minute now. So everybody, just a heads up that he will be addressing the media momentarily. Art, I do want to ask you about Pugh. He had mentioned in his media availability earlier today that he didn't really talk to the Red Wings if he was going to play specifically center or a wing, but you have to imagine that Steve Yzerman wants him to fill that center role.
I would assume that they're hoping that he can step right in and be the second line center. That way Joe Veleno, if he makes the team, and I believe he will, can, learn much like Dylan did his first year. It's better to learn your first full season in the NHL to give, unless you're Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, an extraordinary player, to learn how to play in the NHL to center position. Very, very difficult because you have to play a two-way game. To have him maybe Veleno learn on the wing, much like Michael Rasmussen did, who's now a center. He should be the third line center. And then that fourth line center looks like it might be up for grabs now with Luke Glendening gone. But I think that, the Red Wings want him to be a second line center. I would be stunned if that doesn't happen.
And some news that maybe got buried in all of this free agency stuff. Let's not forget Nick Leddy and Alex Nedeljkovic are now Red Wings as well. Alex Nedeljkovic, obviously goalie who played really well in Carolina last season. He was a part of their 3-goalie tandem that they had going, along with the Reimer and Mrazek as well. And then we also, as I mentioned, Nick Leddy from New York, who is a defenseman, a left shot defenseman that a lot of people speculate he might be paired with Moritz Seider later. And he's here, everybody. He's taking the podium, so we're going to toss to the presser. We'll be back with more after this.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. Red Wings Executive Vice President and
General Manager Steve Yzerman available for some questions. If you'd like to ask a question to Steve, please let us know in the chat. We'll get started in just a minute once we have a few questions. Start off with Wayne St. James, Detroit Free Press.
Steve, how did these signings fit into what you're trying to do? Let's start with Pius.
Well, I guess a few things to look at. One, his age when he was not qualified by Chicago. I think he's 25 years old. Fits into the same age group as pretty much all of our core. And as we try to move young players or transition younger players onto the team, in a year, 2, 3 years from now, potentially, he fits in with the core group of our teams with Dylan and Tyler and Robbie Fabry, all these guys. So, and then the other obvious thing is he is a centerman, an offensive-minded playmaking centerman, which was a real need for our team.
And do you feel, with him and Sam Gagner can play pretty much anywhere and on both special teams, and adding Nick Leddy on the back end, an offensive-minded defenseman, that you've taken steps towards improving this team's scoring power?
I think so, a little bit. We're really, a question I've gotten a lot. Again, you raise it in previous meetings with our local media. It seems to be improving the offense. I think it's not the only area we need to improve upon. We need to, we certainly need to improve upon our defensive game as well. But I'd like to think, with Pew Suter in there, with Nick Leddy, and just the rest of our group, Tyler Bertuzzi coming back healthy, I think we're going to, generate a little bit more offense. We'll score a few more goals. I think. How many, I really don't know. But ultimately, we need to be better defensively. So I don't know that I put any more value over one than the other. We're trying to get better in all areas.
All right, last thing. Are you considering yourself pretty much done as far as signings? I know things can always happen, but this way, I think you kind of leave a little room for maybe some young guy to come out of camp.
Yeah, that's certainly, like, for our younger players, if they come in training camp and do well and they earn a spot, that's great. What I'm not necessarily doing is going to leave spots open just to hand it to one of the younger players or for them to get it by default. I think it's important that they, at this stage, if they're ready to go, great, we'll find a spot, we'll figure out a solution for it. But I don't, I'm not going to sign a player that we don't think is a fit, that we don't think can help us. We'll wait for something better to come along, but we're still looking at a few things, not so much on the back end or in goal, but up front, looking at a few things to potentially add one more player, possibly two. But again, for our young guys, that that have a chance to crack the lineup, we would rather they simply are better than the players that we have. So I kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here is, if a young guy can play, great. I don't want to leave a spot on the roster open just to hand it to anyone, but I'm also not going to sign a free agent feeling, oh, we have a hole, let's just plug it, because I don't think that usually works out well. I'm trying to find guys that can serve a purpose.
If you cover all your bases, you're never wrong, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not usually right either, so somewhere in the middle.
Next up, Ansar Khan, M Live.
Yeah, hi, Steve. You talk a little about Osterley, what you liked about him?
Well, I think he's versatile. He was used in Arizona, kind of in all situations, really, power play, penalty killing, even on even strength. He's a good skater, so we think that's important, particularly with, you get into 4-on-4 and then 3-on-3 overtimes. But we like his versatility, and I think he's even played a little bit on the right-hand side. But I think he's a real versatile, useful player. His skating is good. I think he complements our left side well, and can fill in anywhere there.
And just overall, the defense, do you like the just the depth and the balance? I mean, you've got I think 7 or so experienced NHL guys, and then plus Seider, and then seems like you got a good righty lefty mix there, and it seems like a lot of competition too for spot.
Yeah, if everyone's healthy, you look at it, we have 8 defensemen, including Moritz Seider there. Like now, Moritz, if he's in the top 6, and he's earned that spot in the top 6, he'll play. I'm not sure if he's not in the top 6, how much we're going to want to sit him in the press box. So we'll worry about that when it comes, but we anticipate him making a really good push to play. But as far as the 8-4, I like having 4 rights, 4 lefts. The veterans we do, Philip Hronek's still a young D-man. Gustav Lidstrom has played a little bit in the last 2 years in the NHL with Troy Stetcher there. So we've got experience, we have some depth. So I like to think our D, we're in a little bit better position today than we were a year ago.
Thanks, Steve.
Next up, Max Boltman with The Athletic.
Hey, Steve, obviously Pius would have gone head-to-head with you guys quite a few times last year. Did that help kind of your familiarity with him? And what did you see when you watched him that really jumped out as a fit, other than, being a fairly young center?
Yeah, well, again, we got to watch him firsthand 8 times, and he had some success against us. Having success against us doesn't necessarily, put it over the top. I think he filled the need for us. He is a skilled guy. He's got good hands. I think he's got good hockey sense. He has some versatility to him as well. So again, we had a big hole there in that in the center position for an offensive-minded playmaker. But certainly watching him 8 times last year live over a relatively short period of time gives you a good, you get a good feel for what their strengths are, what exactly they do well on the ice, and the type of player they are. So that made it more comfortable for us to reach out and sign him.
And then when you talk about the young players competing for jobs, where does Veleno fit into that? Is he he came up at the end of last year. Is he still in your mind a prospect competing for a job, or does he kind of go in penciled into the roster?
No, he's a young prospect competing for a job. Joe going over to Sweden last year, I think, was great. He got to play a lot, and he's really he's gotten really much stronger over the last 18 months. We got a little bit of a view of him at the end of the season here in Detroit. Whatever, he played 4 or 5 games, I think, and he looked pretty good. So I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, he's destined for Grand Rapids, but he's definitely not penciled into the roster. And he, without a doubt, will be a real interesting one to watch in preseason, and to see if he can really, hold his own. I don't want him just to be on the roster. I want him to play well. I want him to be contributing, which obviously is important to us, but it's important for his confidence and his development to be able to succeed out there. And we're really pleased with his attitude, his work ethic, and determination to continue to get better. So, we're very optimistic. But again, I want him to simply, not give us any choice, that it's clear and obvious that we're a better team with him on it. And if we are, he'll be there. And I just honestly, I think it's only a matter of time. Is it a question of, is it coming in early October or sometime in the future?
And then last thing for me, with a few of the European prospects, is Edvinsson, Vero, Soderblom, Bratstrom, are those guys available to you in Traverse City, or do they have to start over in Europe? Or how do you see that going?
Bratstrom will definitely be here, or I anticipate him definitely be here. I expect Soderblom, Edvinsson, who was the other one?
Vero.
Vero, no, they'll definitely be in Europe. Definitely be in Europe. So we won't see them in training camp.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Next up, Bob Duff, Detroit Hockey Now.
Things you just said about Veleno, I assume that's similar with Raymond. You want to see him playing in the NHL as a player, not just being in the NHL.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Again, Lucas, we have very high hopes for him. I think he had a pretty good year in Sweden, missed a little time at the end. He had an issue with his elbow that he had to get taken care of. We expect him to be fully ready to go at training camp, and we'll see. But we think he has a real bright future. Is he ready to go in September, October? Maybe, but we got to wait and see.
And, with the things you did before the draft and things you've done now in free agency, do you feel good that this team is going to be better this year than it was last year?
I hope we're better. It's a day after the first day of free agency. We all, for the most part, I think every team sits back and you look at your board and you think, you know what, I think we're a better hockey team. So I do. We're going to have some younger players playing bigger roles. Sometimes that can be a challenge. But I think our back end is a little stronger. It's a little bit more mobile, maybe a little bit more offense out of it. I think having Suter there with a healthy Tyler Bertuzzi, I think we get a little bit more offensive output from everyone. I hope that translates to wins. So I guess I think so, but I can't guarantee it.
And lastly, what's the latest update you've had on Larkin's progress?
He's progressing fine. We expect him to be ready to go in September for the start of training camp.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next up, Ted Colfin, Detroit News.
Hey, Steve. What in terms of Sam Gagner, what did you like about him last season that made him the guy that you really wanted him to return this time around?
You know what? Sam's really he came into the NHL as a high draft pick who was a really offensive-minded player. And we re-signed him. He transitioned, remade himself into a really versatile player. He did a great job killing penalties last year, very responsible defensively. He does have that versatility that he can play on the power play, a lot of different spots on it. I think he's not going to hurt your right wing or left wing, or you could probably throw him in the middle too, because that's where he started. But what I do like is, generally he's a great pro. I think he's got a great attitude. He's comfortable in the role he has on the team as a veteran, setting a good example for the young guys. He's patient. He's been through it all. So he's got great experience that he can relay or pass on to the younger players. But again, he's a very versatile guy for us. And like I said, last year, he really transitioned in his game and remade himself and has become a valuable defensive forward who can play in a lot of different spots for us.
Steve, one more. What did you think of the market on the whole yesterday? Was it a lot more active and just more term and dollars?
Certainly a wild week in the NHL between trades and then yesterday players moving teams. Going into maybe 2 weeks ago, a week ago, I wasn't really sure like that. Last year I think was kind of a little bit of a depressed market for a lot of reasons, and mostly due to the pandemic and lower revenues probably for everyone expected. Wasn't really sure what it was going to be. Is probably a little bit more active, a little bit more movement maybe than really I kind of anticipated initially. So I thought it was entertaining. There was things happening the last week, trades going on. And so for Seattle coming in obviously throws a kink into a normal off season for everybody else. And forces you to do things for different reasons, and it creates 23, 24 more jobs in the NHL too, which there's finding players to make a difference is getting harder and harder with each team that we add. And so anyway, all that adds up to, we're kind of returning to somewhat business as usual. You're adding another team. So everybody was getting a little bit more aggressive.
Thanks for this, Steve.
Next up, Art Regner, DetroitRedWings.com.
Hi, Steve.
Art, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I wanted to ask you, kind of follow up what Ted said. Were you kind of glad when you saw what was happening in the goaltending market yesterday that, hey, thank heaven I got that all kind of cleared up. I took care of that, because it seemed like a lot of teams were making it up as they went along because guys seemed to be shifting so quickly.
Well, it's really hard, Art, to plan for free agency, because you just don't know. You have this list of guys. You really have no idea if you're getting them. And when you don't get the first guy, it's a juggling act, and guys are going, even for like fourth liners, the guys you really like, they're gone early. So it's hard to plan for free agency. And again, going into it where we are right now, as an organization, you kind of, it's hard to get the top free agents. So we thought, exploring the trades for acquiring Nick Leddy, a top 4 D-man, and Alex Nedeljkovic, who we think is, based on last year, a very, very good goaltender who's really can challenge to be a starter. That, for the price we had to pay, it was worth it, because the uncertainty of going into the market for these guys and the likelihood that we're going to get any of the kind of what we thought were the top guys probably wasn't realistic. So yeah, we were glad to get the deals done on those 2 players in particular prior to free agency.
Mark Stahl being signed, and people look at that no movement clause, but could you explain that a little bit? That just means if a deal is there, he just has to okay it. It doesn't mean that he can't be moved. Is that the proper explanation for that?
Well, I think more simply put, he can't be moved without his permission.
Right.
Ultimately, it's as simple as this. Mark Stahl's got a family. He's kind of weighing his options of where I want to go. I'd like to go somewhere and play and not have to uproot my family. Considering, I don't know what other options he had. I don't know what other dollar amounts he could get, but he wanted to come here and play. He likes it here. He enjoyed his experience last year. He just wanted to know that more so for his family's sake. And then ultimately, if we get to the trade deadline and for whatever various reasons that we want to, explore moving Mark Stahl, we're simply going to have that discussion at that time. So that's I have no problem with some of these veteran guys. You got to make some to bring them in, particularly prior to free agency or on the first day of it. You're going to have to make some concessions, and I think this was a very, very reasonable concession to make. And we're signing him not to trade him at the deadline. We're really signing him to play with our young lefty and be a good leader and be the guy he was on our team last year. He didn't have a no move clause last year, and we didn't trade him. So it's not that big of a deal. And if we get into that situation in the spring, we can sit down and discuss it.
Luke Witkowski's back. Because you have such a not very many right-handed shots in the forward core, he did play a little forward. Do you look at, was his maybe versatility one of the reasons why you decided to bring Luke back to Detroit?
Yeah, definitely. The versatility of he can go up and play on the right wing. He did that here in Detroit. He did it in Tampa. He's rugged, hard-nosed. He's a great person, a great leader. So those are the reasons. So he gives us some depth to play here, to play in Grand Rapids, gives us the flexibility to play him at 2 positions, great leadership, and tough as nails.
And finally, my final question, I promise this is it. Do you expect Chase Pearson to compete for the 4th line center job?
I think he can. he can compete for that. Do I expect him to? Yeah, he's going to compete. He did really well in GR this year. I think he made a significant step. And he doesn't need waivers again. So if he's the right fit for that, he's the best man for the job. We'll put him in there. But again, I'm, with the ability to, I would trade off how much is he going to play. If he's going to play 5 or 6 minutes, he might be better off, playing significant minutes in Grand Rapids. And he really benefited last year. He played in all situations and did really well. So we were really pleased with the year that he had. And, I wouldn't rule it out. So we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Art.
Next up, Bob Wanowski, Detroit News.
Hey there, Steve. How are you?
Good, Woj. How are you?
Good, thanks. You obviously have had a fairly productive offseason, trades, draft, and everything else. I think you've said before it's still so hard to find that star, the superstar, whatever, the face of the franchise. Tonight, because they got lottery luck, the Pistons are going to get their face of the franchise, Cade Cunningham, supposedly. Do you feel like is anybody lurking on your roster now that you think can be that guy, or is it still going to come down to a big trade or lottery luck at some point?
Well, I don't want to put that, hey, I think this guy's going to be a superstar tag on anyone of our young guys. That would just put unfair burden on or unnecessary burden on them. I think we got a group of good young, players, our prospects that aren't here, the Lucas Raymonds, you guys have seen a bit of Moritz Seider, Edmondson, Kosa down the line. I think these guys all have a chance to be really good players. How good, I don't know. I go back to David Pasternak of the Boston Bruins. I think he's a superstar, a fantastic player. Got drafted 25th overall, I think it was. And quickly it showed, like when he first came in, that, hey, this guy looks, I think they put him in Boston pretty early. He started to look clearly in his first few games like, wow, this guy looks like he's going to be really good. Do we have guys like that? Maybe, but let's see how they look in the NHL, when they get here and play. So I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, we got this guy's a surefire superstar, first line player, or Norris Trophy winner, or Vezina Trophy winner. But I think we have a group of really good prospects that have a chance to be really good players.
And there was nobody like that available for you this offseason, it doesn't seem like, was there?
In the draft, you mean?
Or in free agency?
Well, I let you judge that for yourselves. I don't know who would be the big, the biggest prizes in free agency this year. There's certainly, a couple years ago, the top players just don't get to free agency. They usually get signed very rarely. I don't know that any of them. John Tavares might be the biggest name in recent times that got to free agency. They just don't get there. In this year's draft, I think the young man, Owen Power at Buffalo, got first overall, has a chance to be a really good player. Is he going to be Victor Hedman? Maybe. But he's a really good player. Time will tell. After that, like I say, I use David Pasternak as an example. I think he's a superstar. He was picked 25th overall. When they made that pick, I don't think anybody was saying, he's a definite superstar, so I don't know. There's some really good, really good young players taken in the draft. Do they get stronger? Do they develop into that? Time will tell. It's just, I think it's safe to say there wasn't, Connor McDavid wasn't available in this draft. Austin Matthews wasn't available. Doesn't mean Owen Power picked first overall isn't going to be a superstar. He could be. He's certainly big and smart and skilled and can skate, has a lot of the tools to be. It was a funny year this year because the guys, they didn't get to play a lot. Michigan misses out on, the NCAA tournament, which would, you'd see, World Juniors were a little bit different. A lot of players missed that. So you don't have a true handle on some of these prospects, and some might be a lot better than we really got to see.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no trouble.
Our last question, Brad Galley, WXYZ.
Steve, I want to go off of what Wojo was talking about with you there, if you're cool with it. I know Max had asked you and brought up a stat a few months ago, like the teams that have won the Cup without a number 1 or number 2 overall draft pick. I know you didn't put all the chips into this upcoming season, but is there a thought still in the back of your mind that maybe you're still looking for a little bit of lottery luck in the next 2 drafts, considering Shane Wright and Bedard coming up in the next two?
Yeah, well, like you need luck in the lottery. Unfortunately, ours hasn't been great. Nothing we can do about it. How we're going to get lucky. Like to get a first pick or a second pick. Looking at it right now, we're going to have to get lucky in the lottery. Like I don't know where we finished this year. Again, last year, as you all know, or 2 years ago, we had the worst record in the league and picked fourth. This year we end up picking sixth. It's hard to finish last, and when you finish last, there's no guarantee you're getting the first pick. So where we finish in the upcoming season, I'm not really sure. So, somewhere along the line, you got to think the odds until we're in the playoffs and out of the lottery, where someday we're going to get lucky here.
Are you confident that you could make a run without ultimately getting one of those number 1 or 2 overall picks?
Absolutely. That's the way we're going to have to. The way I look at it now is like, we're, as much as we'd love to get a first or second overall pick, the way I hope to get it now is through the lottery. It doesn't mean we're giving up on the rebuild or trying to expedite it and sign a bunch of free agents and trade picks to move up. We're going to stick with the process. We're going to have to find a great player at 6, whether it's at Edmondson or Cider. Somewhere as we improve, we're going to hopefully start to pick lower and lower or higher and higher, depending on which way you want to look at it, and get a good young player. But St. Louis won the Stanley Cup. I think Pietrangelo was their highest pick. I think he was number 4. We have Lucas Raymond at number 4. So there's a precedent for it, picking at 4. Obviously, we'd all love to have that franchise player. Maybe we get one with a later pick. Nikita Kucherov was 57. I say David Pastrnak was 25. Patrice Bergeron, he was an early second round pick. Brad Marchand was a 4th round pick. These are the top players in the league. So to hope we can get it with first or second overall. If we get one of those picks, I hope we're getting it because we got lucky in the lottery, not necessarily because we finished 31st this year or 32nd, excuse me. So that's the system, and we just got to find players, whether it's picking 4 or 8 or 12. There's good players out there, good prospects, and for various reasons, they're picked at different spots.
I'd love to ask you just one more. Listening to you talk about the off season, I imagine throughout your life you haven't played video games very much, but when I did, the off season part was more fun. The player acquisition, the drafting, the free agency, grabbing people and moving. In your job, is this your favorite part of the calendar, the draft, the free agency, the player acquisition, or is it a different part of the year? Where does this fit into it?
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's enjoyable. It's kind of stressful because there's so much uncertainty to it all. You don't know who you're getting in the draft. You're making your first pick and there's 4 guys you want, but you can only have 1. And you're like, please pick the right guy. Please pick the right guy. Free agency, you don't know who you're getting. You're trying to negotiate with your own free agents. You don't know if they're staying or going. So there's a lot of uncertainty to it, and you got to sit back and just take a deep breath and say, okay, this is what I signed up for. Let's focus on, the draft and prioritize, and you get through with it. And we came into it's amazing. Like these last 2-3 weeks have been really, really busy. And today we kind of come in this morning and we're sitting here and it's relatively quiet. There's still a lot of things to be done, but you get through that first day of free agency, and then things kind of settle down a little bit. So is it fun? Yeah. It's an incredible challenge, but I don't know that anybody really, we all like some form of certainty, and this is the biggest period of uncertainty for us all.
Thanks for the time, Steve.
Looks like that's all the questions we have for Steve. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Steve, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey guys.
I muted myself again just so that way I didn't interrupt the press conference, but here we are. As always, a lot to unpack from Steve Yzerman there. Let's bring in Art and Carly so we can talk about this a little bit. Again, he said a lot. So Art, why don't you go ahead and give us your biggest takeaway from what Steve Yzerman just said?
I think he's comfortable where this team is at right now. I think he's a little bit at ease. I wanted to ask him about the Nadalkovich thing because yesterday it was just virtually insane, which was going on with goaltending. But I think that he would be disappointed if some of these youngsters don't take the next step up this year. I really do think it. He's not going to hand it to them. He's not going to give it to them. It's not the Red Wing way. But the days of we keep our prospects overripe down in the minors, those days are over. I mean, he wants players. He wants players that can play. And I think that when we're up in Traverse City this year, that training camp is going to be incredible. And I do think that Luke Witkowski, has a good shot at making this team because he is a brash young man, as we know. And I know it's a two-way deal. But he can play right wing, and he doesn't look out of place up front. So I think that he really does enjoy this. When Brad Galley asked him that question, when Brad asked him this question, how could you not? I mean, this is everybody at one time has probably played fantasy sports. And Steve gets to do it for a living, I mean, piecing a team together, looking, traveling the world, searching for players. And, obviously he himself was, one of the immortals of the game. But with all that saying, I just think he looks relaxed. And that's a good feeling. I mean, let the chips fall where they may. But at this point, what was available, and I thought the most interesting thing he did say was that you just don't know who you're going to get in the draft. You don't know who you're going to get in free agency because you're hoping maybe, please take this guy, or you don't know what your own unrestricted free agents are going to do. So, you've got to think on the fly. And I think that based on that philosophy where you have to think on the fly, I think he's pretty comfortable with where this franchise is at as of today. And trust me, he's not done tinkering. I think there's got to be a couple of right-handed shooting forwards somewhere down the line, but we'll see.
Yeah, he was talking about the draft art, and he mentioned Pietrangelo being the highest drafted player for St. Louis, going at number 4. I was just waiting for him to say, and I was drafted 4th. Like, hello, everybody. I wasn't 1 and 2.
He'll never say that.
Yeah, I know he won't, but you can tell he wanted to. I think he wanted to.
Oh, yeah. Hey, look at me. I was 4. What are you talking about, Brad?
What do you think, Carly? What were your biggest takeaways?
This is kind of a little off the beaten path about what I would normally highlight after a press conference like that. But when he was talking about Mark Stahl, and he was talking about, he had opportunity, we gave him the options, if he has a family, and that was like the biggest thing, the biggest aspect of his decisions was based on his family. And I understand that, guys, these aren't just players. They have families, like their dads, their brothers, their husbands. So it was cool hearing him talk about the personal aspect of Mark Stahl. But I loved seeing, with some of these veteran guys, like, you have to make these concessions. And he said, we're not signing him to trade him at the deadline, but, he wants him, Mark Stahl, to play with the young lefties, because obviously we know there are a lot of left-handed defensemen that we've just acquired or drafted. So down the line, I mean, in this organization, I think you need those veteran players who are going to show them the way. But, when we were talking about Sam Gagner, too, he's a leader in the room and them extending his contract. Like, just having some veteran presence in the locker room and on the ice, like, I always knew that was important. But hearing Steve, because we do have such a young and upcoming team, I mean, we really do. So hearing him talk about how important it is to have some of those veterans, it was interesting. And I know that's kind of like a small slice of the pie of what we heard on when he was talking, but that, like, it stuck in my head. But besides that, when he was talking about guys like Seider and Veleno and wanting them to succeed, and everyone was asking, who are we going to see on the team next year? This upcoming season, I should say. Is it going to be Veleno? Is it going to be Seider? What are we going to see after training camp? And he's like, they're young prospects competing for a job. They're competing for a spot. If they deserve it, I'll give it to them. But I don't want them just sitting on the roster, sitting in the press box during games. Like, I think he wants them to get that gameplay. So if it is in the AHL, it's in the AHL. But if it's in the NHL, which we would love to see, of course, top 6 defenseman being Moritz Seider paired with someone. It would be incredible to see. We all want to see him in a winged wheel next season, but again, like Steve Yzerman said, if he's not in the top 6, he doesn't want him just benched. So he said, we'll see what happens at the end of training camp. There's so much excitement surrounding this team that I don't know. I'm excited. I feel like none of that made sense.
It did. And training camp will be a very exciting training camp this season.
That's word vomit.
Yeah.
I mean, Carly does bring up a good point, and I thought something interesting too that Steve also said is that I don't want to label any of our guys the next superstar. And I think that longtime Detroit sports fans can remember years ago, Sparky Anderson said that Kirk Gibson was going to be the next Mickey Mantle. And it's not so much that affected Gibby or put a lot of pressure on him, but the expectation from the fan base just skyrockets, oh, wow, my next Mickey Mantle, and Gibby had a good career and we love Gibby, he was not Mickey Mantle. And I think that that's why he always tries to amp things down or tamp things down, whatever the proper word is. And I think that's it. I mean, there's players here, and I think Mo Seider's one of them. I'm not going to say devastated, but if he's not in the top 6 for the Red Wings this year out of training camp, that is going to be a bit of a setback for this rebuild. I think that would be a major disappointment. I don't expect it to happen. I don't think the Red Wings expect it to happen. And Mark Stahl is one of these athletes, and how many times have we seen it, as Daniela and Carly, as your career advances, you will see this more and more of athletes who come to Detroit and they're like, oh my God, I'm in Detroit, and then end up loving it here, staying here after their career. How many ex-athletes actually live here? I know it's almost a cliche now. This is a great place to be a professional athlete. It just is. Whether you're a Red Wing, a Tiger, a Lion, or a Piston, the sports is Detroit's culture. There's such a big vibe and heartbeat in this city, along with, the musical heritage that Detroit has. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'm a big Detroit fan. But with that said, and I think that Mark Stahl, when he got here, he just loved it. I mean, he absolutely loved it because it's a great environment to play in. And I'm not surprised that he likes it here. He's one of many.
Him. He's an official Detroiter. We'll adopt him. He can be an official Detroiter with us. Okay, one thing I did want to mention about the press conference was there's going to be competition at almost every position. Like I said, training camp will be at the last, including goaltending. He talked about Alex Nedeljkovic a little bit and that he could contend for the number 1 goaltending position. So a battle between him and Thomas Greiss. But the whole tandem thing really worked out last season. And I know that the schedule was a little bit different than what we're used to. But hey, maybe we'll see something similar to that as we move forward. But I do want to wrap this up with getting a little bit sentimental, you guys. We have to give our personal goodbyes and thank yous to Luke Glendening, who is officially headed to the Dallas Stars. We know he was a Michigan guy. We loved watching him play at the University of Michigan as a Grand Rapids Griffin, and of course as a Detroit Red Wing. And while Darren Helm hasn't officially been announced by Colorado, there are reports saying that he's going to sign a deal there. So we want to wish him all the best in this process too. Obviously, if he does ultimately not end up a Red Wing, he was a big part of this organization for a long time. So best of luck to those guys. Now, Carly, take it away. I'll let you say your piece.
Oh, these are guys that I started my job 4 years ago with the Red Wings. These are guys that I talked to first in this organization, Darren Helm and Luke Glendening. They've always been very gracious and just great guys to be around. They're leaders in the locker room, and it shows not just in the locker room, but out on the ice too. You get to know these guys like they're friends. So it's sad, but I'm so happy for them to get other opportunities and explore the rest of the NHL. And you know what? While they're a bit older than us and a bit older in the league, if you will, it's an exciting time in your lives to go travel and live somewhere else. Luke Glendening has been in Michigan literally his whole life. So just for he and his wife Paige to have that kind of experience, I'm happy for them. But I can't imagine how tough that is, especially being a hometown guy for Glenny. So again, I hope the best for them. I really will be rooting them on. Hard to say that about the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars, but you know what? Those are teams that I will be rooting on. Kind of. Okay, I'll just be rooting on Glennie and
There you go. Art, before I let you go, I do want to mention too, I didn't mean to forget, but Jonathan Bernier as well. He's now going to be a New Jersey Devil, and I mentioned how great our goaltending duo was last season. Jonathan Bernier may have been the team MVP, so definitely wishing him the best too. And Alex Biega, I believe it was Toronto, right? I'm not mistaken. He's going to Toronto.
The Bulldog is a
There was
Leaf.
a lot going on today, so forgive me there, but definitely great guys. Wishing them all the best. Now, Art, go ahead, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Well, yeah, certainly I want to wish the best to Luke Glendening. You know, obviously he's familiar with Jim Nill. Jim Nill was here in the organization when he was brought into the Detroit fold. And so, a lot of things that Jim Nill does, very similar to what the Red Wings do because, he was Red Wing assistant general manager for over 20 years. I remember Jimmy Nill as a player for the Red Wings, wore number 8. So I think that's going to be a good fit. If Luke had to leave Detroit, I'm glad that he landed in a spot with Jim Nill as his general manager, truly. Darren Helm, hey, I mean, that guy, what can you say about him? I mean, he gave it 110% each and every shift. He dealt with injuries. He had some major back injuries that it looked like his career. He almost didn't play for 2 solid seasons trying to get that back together. So, I mean, and I know we shouldn't use this expression a lot. It's overused, but he definitely was a warrior out on the ice for the Red Wings. He has a really good shot with Colorado. If Colorado's goaltending now holds up, to be part of the to the Cup. So good luck to them. And Danielle, I really want to piggyback because I know we have to go. But I think we've seen with Jeff Blashill and the goaltending tandem that he rides the hot hand. If Grace is hot or Nedeljkovic is hot, he rides the hot hand. You know what? He's a former goaltender, and and riding the hot hand, I mean, that's an up and down. You can be great for like a 2-week period, and then you can't stop anything. So I think it's in good hands, and I would not be surprised if the split is very, very close at the end of the season, barring injury, and let's hope not. That Nedeljkovic and Grice, it could be 41-41 for all I know as far as starts, but it's going to be a hot hand. The philosophy for Jeff Blashill is who's ever hot, that's who's in net.
Yeah. It's an incredible luxury to have 2 solid goaltenders. That's all I was going to say, Danielle. Go ahead.
One thing we can guarantee, and we can't guarantee that much, is that this season and this training camp, everything leading up to it is going to be a really exciting one. So, of course, stay tuned to everything Red Wings on the social media channels. Thank you so much for tuning into this special edition of The Word on Woodward presented by Pointsbet. We'll see you next time.